Hey gaming fans, so I'm back with another discussion video, and this one is somewhat sort of like the video I did before where I talked about 3 cards that hardly anybody uses in Yu-Gi-Oh! For the GOAT format specifically. I'm going to do this one, which is 3 cards that would actually surprise your opponent if you actually were to pull it off. Now these are situational cards, so they're obviously cards that not everybody's going to play in a deck. But I just thought I would point some of these out because they are fun, and it would be interesting to see the look on their face if you actually did pull it off. Now the first card I have here is Electric Snake. Now this one is, there's actually other cards similar to it, but when this card is sent directly from your hand to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, you can draw 2 cards from your deck. Now the thing about this card is, we know that most people in GOAT format play Delinquent Duo. It's one of the Trinity cards. Everybody plays Pod, Agreed, Graceful Charity, and Delinquent Duo. So this card actually could really surprise your opponent if it was sitting in your hand and they played Delinquent Duo, especially if you were to manage to actually have more than one in your hand. You could really turn the tide of that duel. Basically what would happen is they would play Delinquent Duo. If they hit this card with the random effect of it, you would end up drawing 2 cards in its place, or if not, you would discard it and that would happen. Now, it's not unlikely that your opponent's going to be playing anything that will discard cards out of your hand. I mean, we do have the occasional card destruction that people like to throw in their deck. Again, if it got discarded, you would draw 2 cards. There's also some strategies that do play a lot of card destruction or hand destruction. Cards like Smoke Grenade or the Thief. Now this one's a little bit different because they actually get to choose which card they discard, but if this is the only card in your hand, that's going to be a real pain for them. And there is also some strategies like Gravekeepers who like to throw in cards like Royal Tribute, thinking they're going to diminish your hand. Now obviously some of those are a little more situational than others, but there are other decks that play cards like Don Zalug, who discards a card at random. There's Thestalos, the Fire Monarch, also discards cards at random, so it's not exactly just waiting for Delinquent Duo, but it's still kind of funny if you were to actually pull that off. The second card is Jar Robber. Now, this is probably a card most people don't even know exists, and for good reason. I mean, it only works with one card, and that's Pod Agreed. So obviously once Pod Agreed became banned, nobody ever cared about this card. But that's in regular format. In GOAT format, everybody plays Pod Agreed. I mean, there's always a Pod Agreed in a deck. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't run Pod Agreed in your deck. Unless you don't own one physically, you're always going to put one in your deck. So what this card does is you can only activate this card when Pod Agreed is activated. You negate the effect of Pod Agreed, then draw 1 card from your deck. So you're obviously not going to play it against your own Pod Agreed. That would be silly. But if your opponent thinks they're going to get advantage by playing Pod Agreed, you flip this little guy over, and all of a sudden now they're losing Pod Agreed, and you're gaining a card. So that's actually pretty funny. I'm going to put that in camera view there. But yeah, so I think that even if you were to just set this card, the worst that can happen is they use an MST on this, and they still, you know, it's still 1-for-1 advantage there. It's just the way that this card usually pushes the advantage in your favor when you play it, and this is actually turning that advantage to a disadvantage in a sense. Really funny card. Now there are other cards that do work with Pod Agreed as well. There's Avatar of the Pot, which, you know, I think that you just discard a Pod Agreed to draw 3 cards. And then there's a Spirit of the Pod Agreed, which is whenever someone activates Pod Agreed, they draw an additional card. More situational cards as well. I don't know if I would recommend any of those, but it's just funny that this is just one card that, you know, on your turn, if you set that, eventually your opponent's either going to just waste an MST on it, or they're going to activate that Pod Agreed, and you're going to reap the benefits. Keep in mind, too, people do play Magician of Faith, which allows it to flip up and grab that Pod Agreed out of their graveyard, so there might be an opportunity, if you miss the first activation of Pod Agreed, to hit the second one. So, always a possibility, just kind of fun. And the third one, got these cards upside down here, is Heavy Slump. Now you might have seen this card a few times in some really weird builds, but what it is if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, they shuffle their entire hand into their deck and then draw 2 cards. So that's not far-fetched. I've seen lots of duels where people have a ton of cards in their hands. Cards because of, like I was saying, with Pot of Greed, get you an additional card. And you are playing in a format where your opening hand is 6 cards. So if they play a card like Thunder Dragon, which allows them to pitch Thunder Dragon and add 2 of them to your hand, and then they follow up with a Pot of Greed, they're already matching that 8 cards. Another thing you can do is play cards like Giant Trunade, which would bounce their spells and traps to their hand, and then on their turn, when they draw, they're probably going to have about 8 cards, possibly if they play a lot of face downs. There is another card that you can kind of play to kind of get this card active, is funny cards like this. Suzuki Samurai number 3. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent's life points, your opponent then draws cards until they have 7 cards in their hand. Basically, you're bringing them up to 7 cards. Then on their turn, they're going to draw that 8th card, and then you would activate your Heavy Slump. Kind of a funny little combo. I mean, the problem with Suzuki Samurai number 3 is he is kind of weak. He's only 1,000 attack, so you have to be able to like attack directly or beef him up somehow with a Axe of Despair or something. But still funny combo to get this Heavy Slump to work. But in most cases, I think you put this card down, much like I said with the Jar Robber. The least that can happen with it is they waste an MST getting rid of it. Anyways, these were just situational cards I just thought would be fun to talk about. I know it's not like something everybody's going to rush to put in their decks. It's just a surprise card that if you were to like main deck one, I mean, you use up 1 space for it, just to see the look on your opponent's face when they think they have the advantage and they're going to win, and you spring these guys on them. Anyways, let me know what you think. They're not exactly game-breaking in themselves, but they are fun. Another one I forgot to actually mention is Electric Snake does have its evil little twin, which is Elephant Statue of Disaster, which does the same thing, but instead it inflicts 2,000 points of damage. So again, making that delinquent duo really hurt. They pay the 1,000 life points to activate it, and then they're going to get 2 smacked in the head at the same time. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Hope you subscribe. Talk to you later.